Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Congresswoman Paulina Luna. Congresswoman, thank you for joining me once again.
Thanks for having me back.
Congresswoman, I appreciate you joining me, and we have a wide-ranging conversation today. Let's start with Attorney General Merrick Garland. The House is voting on whether to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress after he did not release the audio tapes between the interview with President Biden and Special Counsel Robert Hur. You're supporting holding him in contempt. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so actually there's two types of contempt of Congress, and I think that Garland ultimately has and should be held in contempt of both. So the first one that we're doing is what you're hearing a lot of chatter on. That would be a referral to the Department of Justice. That's called criminal contempt. And ultimately, because not just one, but two subpoenas were sent by two different chairmen, one Chairman Jordan of House Judiciary, and then also to Chairman Comer of House Oversight, which is the committee that I sit on that leads some of these investigations. And Garland basically refused to respond to either of those and also kept the Hur tapes. And so really, you know, if you're talking about the leader of one of the most powerful countries the world has ever known, that's the United States of America, in this case, Joe Biden, in all seriousness and all jokes aside, there are some serious concerns with members on both sides of the aisle that believe that he has some cognitive issues. And so when we are talking about what happened with that transcript, you know, they're saying that we don't, as Congress, don't need to actually hear the audio recordings because they released a transcript. Well, how do we know that those aren't actually doctored? And as you saw, the reason why the Biden administration really wanted to glaze over that and really, I think, cover it up is because they had pointed out that there were some cognitive issues in that transcription. So we're talking about moving forward if this person can essentially control the country, be our ambassador to the world, and also to make some very important decisions. And it's become clear and evident to me that that might not be the case, which is exactly why we need those transcripts, audio, actual recordings to hear. And ultimately, Garland is not above the law. If it was any other American, that person would probably be in jail right now. But because he's the Attorney General, he seems to think that he does not have to answer to Congress. And that's exactly why, one, I support the current leadership's attempt to hold him in contempt of Congress, of which I do think will pass. But in the event that the Department of Justice does not do their job, I have filed something called inherent contempt of Congress. And what that is that something that is actually reserved. You could think of it kind of like an old form of magic that exists in the House of Representatives. This was commonly done up into the early 1900s. And what this allows is for Congress to be that punitive authority, even on other departments that might think that they are above the law. And so what that would do is allow Congress to hold Garland's in contempt of Congress in the event that the Department of Justice does not do their job. And that may involve sending the sergeant in arms to go get him and order him to the well of the House of Representatives and demand answers, which he should be if he's going to ignore us.
I want to talk about the inherent contempt in just a little bit, but Attorney General Garland did push back on the idea that he would redact or doctor this in any way. He said this to journalists reportedly, quote, "The idea that an Attorney General would edit or redact or censor the special counsel's explanation for why the special counsel reached the decision the special counsel did, that's absurd." What do you make of his response?
You know, I would like to have faith in him. However, as you've seen play out over the last couple of years with President Trump, his family, and his allies, I don't have faith in the Department of Justice, and neither do the American people. In fact, if you look at polling, you're seeing that a lot of people believe that there is a two-tier justice system. And so if he has nothing to hide, then give us the recordings. I don't understand why there's been such a back and forth, but that's not his decision to make. Congress has asked for something by committees that are running investigations, and he is not given the authority to interfere with those investigations. And I would also give further pushback and say that he recently penned a letter to the Washington Post trying to argue his case in a public format. However, I find it very interesting that the Washington Post on a number of occasions has put out hit pieces on Republicans, to include myself, and that they also try to reach out to our office to try to antagonize us shortly after he wrote that letter. So what you're seeing kind of a messy game of politics play out before the November elections, and I don't really care who you are. You're not above the law, and we'll hold you accountable.
I want to remind our viewers what was in Special Counsel's Hur report. He found that President Biden, quote, willfully retained classified materials after his presidency, but he also believed that there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. He also described President Biden as a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The White House counsel said this about Republicans' attempt to get the tapes released. Quote, "The absence of a legitimate need for the audio recordings lays bare your likely goal, to chop them up, distort them, and use them for partisan political purposes." What's your response to that? Is this political? Is this partisan? Is the only reason Republicans want them to chop them up, use them in ads from now till November?
No, in fact, I would even push back and say this. In the event that those recordings come out and that they are not redacted and that they are as they seem to be, I would be the first person to say that I was wrong. However, I believe that the American people deserve to hear those recordings. And I think that that is, just like I have privilege to see what they are, I think that that's the American people's privilege as well. And so I think that that's obviously an effort to try to protect the president, which is exactly why they also tried to exercise executive privilege, but that's also too late because they had already, quote unquote, released transcripts. So we should be able to hear what those recordings are.
Reports indicate that Merrick Garland won't receive any punishment if this contempt vote passes because President Biden asserted executive privilege on these tapes. So knowing that, what is the point of the vote?
So I believe the point of the vote is to show the American people, and we'll see if the Department of Justice is indeed blind and will hold the Attorney General in some form of punitive action. However, I do believe that there is a check and balance, and that would be the inherent contempt motion. So remember those two types of contempt. There's criminal contempt, which goes to the Department of Justice, which is exactly what you're saying. It's not likely that Merrick Garland will be in trouble for what he's done. And then there's inherent contempt of Congress, which allows us as the legislative body to hold him criminally accountable. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do, is bring back that accountability. You know, there seems to be a lot of people who have forgotten that Congress has this toolkit. This is not something that we just made up and pulled out of thin air. This has been something that has been in our legislative toolkit really since Jefferson wrote Jefferson's Manual, so since the founding of our country. And unfortunately, I think that what has happened is even over the last, maybe 60, 70 years, no one could really anticipate that the partisan bureaucrats would weaponize the justice system the way that they have. But that's exactly why I think some of the genius goes back to who actually founded our country and the check and balance that they put on these different factions that currently exist within our government. And so we actually have the ability to bring back accountability. And that's why so many people are, starting to talk about what inherent contempt of Congress is, and really, has it been done? Will it be successful? I think either which way, though, the American people deserve to know what's happening up here. And I think that this will be a pretty transparent vote.
So essentially, let's say the inherent contempt resolution passes. That means that the House Sergeant at Arms would arrest Garland, correct?
It means that the House of Sergeant at Arms has the authority to arrest him. However, likely what will happen is he will go get him and bring him and ask them to bring the tapes. And ultimately, also Congress reserves the right to hold him probably at the Speaker's office until he does so. So I think a lot of people are trying to say that this is some crazy, radical, extremist viewpoint perspective. But actually, if you look at the cases that exist, even up into the early 1900s, this was done commonly for people that thought that they were above the law. So my message is to Garland, you are not above the law. My message is to Joe Biden, you have no authority over Congress. This was a check and balance that our founding fathers put in place for good reason. And unfortunately, we're having to use it today. However, you will be held accountable.
The criminal contempt resolution, Speaker Johnson's whipping up votes, I believe, right now because there is such a slim majority. Do you think that the inherent contempt resolution will pass because the criminal one's having a little bit of trouble right now?
Well, we're going to see. In fact, we have a letter that we're explaining everything, going into detail, the court cases, the legality of it being held up in the Supreme Court. That's going to be going out to our colleagues after this vote hits the floor, so we'll see what happens. But either which way, when someone violates a subpoena, you're seeing that right now many of Trump's allies are actually in hot water because of that, because of stuff that was sent out by the J6 committee. And so if you have someone that's violating a subpoena, not one, but two, and thinks that they're above the law, trying to essentially protect the president, i.e. Biden, who very much so may have a cognitive issue, that can't be tolerated. And so I think that our argument is very valid, and we are going to be actively talking to members that might be on the fence, answering questions. And I do think that this will likely pass, especially if the DOJ does not do their job.
As you know, critics and Democrats have called this political, performative. I want to read what Jerry Nadler said and then just get your response on it before we change subjects. He said this isn't really about a policy disagreement with the DOJ. This is about feeding the MAGA base after 18 months of investigations that have produced failure after failure. What's your response to him?
You know, Nadler is actually also failing to point out that, to my understanding, Raskin wanted to hold members of the Trump administration in inherent contempt of Congress. And it's interesting, when you do the studying and work, you can actually see that I think that they're just angry that they didn't do this first. But also, too, from a messaging perspective, you know, individuals like Nadler, who have been here for a very long time, are largely part of the reason why we're having issues with border security. And he actually made some pretty crazy racially charged comments about people coming here illegally. Obviously, I don't support illegal immigration, but I'm not also willing to import people to work in the fields, as he had stated that they were here for. So I don't really take anything he says seriously.
I do now want to do a total 180 here and switch topics. You and I have talked about reproductive issues before, proxy voting for new moms in Congress, as well as the Right to Try IVF Act of 2024. Senators Katie Britt and Ted Cruz introduced the IVF Protection Act, which would strip states of Medicaid funding if they restricted access to IVF. What are your thoughts on the legislation?
I mean, I think our legislation is better, but what I will say is, and what I found is that you would think that these issues, especially whether it's voting by proxy for new moms or IVF, should be bipartisan. And what I've found is, because of the fact that we are in an election year, a lot of Democrats, to include, you know, Hakeem Jeffries, who I thought was supposed to be the champion of women's rights based on his branding and constant attack on Republicans, he actually told Democrats not to get on my bill, my proxy bill for voting, and then also my IVF bill. And I think that that's because we're going into an election cycle, and you're seeing that they're losing the issues on the economy, they're losing the issues on border security, and so they're trying to make this about reproductive rights. And I think it's pretty evident that they're not even for women. So I think the Democrats are in for a big loss this November.
It's interesting you say that, because IVF, when I have talked about it before, up until the controversial Alabama ruling a few months ago, hasn't been a controversial issue. It's just been a thing that everyone, or if you have trouble getting pregnant, you can use that. That's at your disposal. It currently is legal in all 50 states. So why not just set a law codifying IVF and then take the politics out of it?
I think that that would probably be too common sense for Washington. And unfortunately, you know, I never thought that I would see a male leaders of a party that claims to be the party of women, the Democrat Party, tell members not to get on my bill, whether it's for maternity voting or IVF for that reason. And it's unfortunate, right? Because right after I actually was trying to fix this, and I actually was one of the only members in Congress to actually come up with legislation, the Democrats refused to sign on to it.
And what was their reasoning, publicly and privately?
They were saying that it was too narrow, but I don't believe it was that. We actually heard that it was Hakeem that was telling people not to sign on to it, and same with my vote by proxy.
So do you think we're going to be seeing any IVF legislation soon? From what you were saying earlier, probably not, because it is an election year.
I think that we will see IVF legislation, if not via executive order, after Trump's elected. I know that based on what we're seeing, and obviously you saw Donald Trump Jr. actually did a really great interview on this recently, but President Trump, who, as you know, I've supported and endorsed, is a massive advocate for that. I think that people that are trying to say that IVF is somehow selective abortion or will create this, 1984 world, I think that they're just not informed. A lot of people, if you do know someone who's done IVF, have to do multiple rounds. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be effective. It's extremely expensive, and I don't think that anyone would go through that process unless they really want to have children. And as you know, as a new mom, kids are a blessing. I encourage everyone to have kids. I think that they're amazing, but it really does change your life. And I think for people to try to use this as a political tool just shows how out of touch they are.
Congresswoman, I need to end it there, but thank you so much for joining me. I hope to have you back soon.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.